All right, good morning. We got our coffee, we got our muffins, and we got our Rogue Grenades of Deathtrap build. So let's get into it. Got a video up here in the corner. It's going to be looping. That is this build going through a level 100 pit. And as I make this video, I want you to watch that video and just pay attention to a couple of things. Some of the build sites out there like Maxroll, Icy Veins, etc., they may list this build as an S tier. I personally do not think it's an S tier build. I think it's a very, very good A tier build, but not an S tier build. To me, in order to be an S tier build and to be in that particular class, it needs to be a build that can take a level 100 pit and just crush it like nobody's business and do it in 50% or less time. So you have 15 minutes on the pit. You got to be doing this thing in 7.5 minutes or less. This build does not do that. I have not been able to get this build to do that. It will take me to the halfway mark on that timer just to really get ahead of the timer itself for the pit build version of this. And then I slowly start gaining and growing and getting ahead of that timer overall, at which point eventually I get down to where I have 4.5 minutes roughly to beat the boss at the end of the pit, which we do. And then, of course, in this particular pit, I got hit with the secondary boss that gives you a little extra stuff. But something to pay attention to is how long it takes to get ahead of the timer on this build. And then when I get into the pit boss itself, watch how often he staggers initially. After a bit of time, when we get him down to about the 3/4 mark of life, maybe a little bit less, it starts taking longer and longer and longer to get him to stagger so that I can do more damage to him. To me, an S tier build shouldn't do that. An S tier build should be able to kind of get through the pit in half the time or less, get to that boss, and crush that boss pretty quick and easy. This build just doesn't do it. Now, part of that could be because I'm not wearing exactly everything that is recommended in the build on Maxroll site, which is where I based my build off of initially. But I just don't have what I need to do that, so I couldn't. So let's get into the build itself. The build really hasn't changed from my last video. There's been a couple of things that I made changes to, but not too much. So I am wearing the Harlequin crest to get damage reduction and maximum resource and cooldown, of course. And then on that, we've got our Cervex runes, which I cast 5 skills one time, which doesn't take anything to do. And I'm going to get a +1 to all my skills for 10 seconds, right? We've got our Scoundrel's Leathers, so that our trap and grenade skills are also considered core skills, which is going to give us a huge damage boost with the way that works. We're not too worried about the inner sight side of things here because we're not using inner sight. We're using precision for our rogue specialization. So I ain't too stressed about that. Now, part of me wonders about the second portion of the special ability of these particular leathers, because it says while you have unlimited energy from inner sight, casting a skill, a core skill, gives you 80% chance to spawn caltrops, poison, whatever. But then after that, there's a period, right? At Deathtrap, it periods, and then it says gain 20% multiplicative core skill damage. So I have no way of testing this. I don't know what anybody does to test this, but I'm thinking that the 20 times multiplicative core skill damage is taking effect, even though I'm not using inner sight and I'm using precision. I think those two things, because there's a period after the word Deathtrap, I'm thinking these are two different things here. So while you have unlimited energy from inner sight, comma, casting a core skill has 80% chance to spawn caltrops, poison trap, or death trap, period. Gain a 20% multiplicative core skill damage, right? So your trap and grenade skills are now considered core skills, and because of that last bit of line there, they're getting a 20% multiplicative core skill damage increase. That's the way I read that. I have no way of testing that and verifying that that's what's happening, but I do believe that's what's happening in order to create all the damage. And then, of course, we have our grand emeralds in here to get the 60 increase to the dexterity for 2 of them. Fists of Fate, I did find a better Fist of Fate than what I was using before, so I got the perfect 300% on it. I got a 17.7 lucky hit chance there. A previous pair of Fist of Fates I was wearing only had a 270, 275 I think it was, on them for the random attack damage deal, but it had a 100% lucky hit chance. So I was kind of debating whether to wear those, keep those on or not, because I liked having that 100% lucky hit chance. But even with putting these on, my lucky hit chance was still fairly high. I'm looking for it here. I want to say it was like at 90 something percent. Where is it? Where is it? I know there was something that shows you your lucky hit damage. Percentage, anyway. Yeah, lucky hit chance bonus. So right now it sits at 35.8%. However, once you get all your buffs and your attacks going, this gets up where somewhere around 90% when you're actually in the pits or in battles, with the current layout the way it is. So I was like, yeah, I'll take it. The other one was definitely giving me 100%, and I was doing a lot more damage initially, more often, but that 300%, I really wanted that. And I could always masterwork this again and again and again to see if I can get that lucky hit chance to increase. So we might do that because I can afford it. I've got $1 billion plus, and Obdicite's easy to get. Just run a Infernal Horde and then go for the middle chest there. So our pants still the same here, right? We've got Eyes in the Dark. I was wearing a 750 item power before. I finally found an Ancestral with the 800 on it, so I can masterwork it 12 times. Got a nice increase to the ultimate damage on that. And then, of course, we got our damage reduction. And then, of course, the Death Trap deals 150 multiplicative, which is perfect on it. And then we added our Grand Emeralds. We got our Beastfall boots here. Yes, they're Ancestral. They're really good on the maximum resource and the ultimate cooldown reduction, and of course the +8 to agile. But the special ability itself, percentage, kind of sucks. It would have been nice to get a 0.75, but hey, 0.70, I'll take a 0.7%. It is what it is. Still using the same crossbow here, Apogeic Furor on it, right? Still haven't maxed out the aspect abilities yet. There's a few more levels to get on that in order to get it up to the perfect 220%. On our amulet, still using tricksters, so that our caltrops, smoke grenade, and death trap receive the stun grenade benefits and throw stun grenades. I don't care about the fact that those stun grenades are dealing 2,025 damage itself. Be nice if that was perfect at max level there. So I still got a couple of levels to get on that to get it where it needs to be. But any damage number that is in there is good, because that's going to come into play with one of our Paragon boards and the glyph that we're using. So I'm not too worried, again, like I said, about the damage itself and that number there. As the aspect grows, it's just going to get better anyway. We really care about the fact that our traps are now considered stun grenades because we're using a glyph called explosive, and where that glyph is located in the Paragon board setup, it's going to shoot our damage up based on how that glyph works, and we'll get to that in a minute. Wearing the Ring of Starless Sky still here for obvious reasons, right? We get a plus to core skills. Our core skills are now Trap and Grenade because of the Scoundrel's Leather, so that right there gives them a plus automatically and increases the damage on them. Still got the same old ring here where casting an ultimate for Vehement Brawlers. That ultimate's going to be a 29% multiplicative increase for 8 seconds, and we get 2 additional ultimate skill ranks because of that. And then down here we're using Blast Trappers for the sword that I'm wearing. Dealing damage to enemies affected by your trap skills has a 31% chance to cause an explosion that deals 524 shadow damage. I'm not too worried about that part of it, the shadow damage part or whatever. I'm more interested in the applies vulnerable for 2 seconds because I'm trying to increase my vulnerable damage through the Paragon board if I can. And so if I can apply vulnerable and then have an increase to vulnerable damage, right, it's just more beneficial. Because these 2 particular weapons here, it's kind of a toss-up in what aspect you want to wear on them. The max roll build recommends 2 different aspects that increase your grenade damage, but it's an additive increase. It's not really a multiplicative increase. And quite frankly, I just didn't feel like it was doing it for me. It wasn't getting things done. So I was kind of testing things out and changing things out. So right now I'm going with this one to get the vulnerable applied, and it seems to be doing well. Over here on their dagger, we're using Inner Calm simply because it's just an 11% across the board multiplicative damage increase, right? And then, of course, if you're standing still after 3 seconds, it triples it to 33%, right? So, you know, we get that aspect tapped out to its max level. I can get 13% out of that to start with, and then we'll get 39% multiplicative if we're standing still for 3 seconds. And it's just a good overall general damage booster, right? So that's why I'm going that way. As you can see with the gems, I've put in an increased ultimate damage here in these 2. In our crossbow, we are wearing Zan Mott, so that when we cast an ultimate skill, we gain a shadow from the Dark Shadows, Dark Shroud shadow skill, which is going to help with our damage reduction, because as you can see this whole time, my fire resistance, lightning, right, all my resistances, they just suck in general. This particular build's very difficult to get resistances tapped out at 70%. You can sacrifice doing some damage to do a different layout on your Paragon board to get your resistances where they need to be, but I didn't want to do that because it was difficult to progress in the pits by doing that. So I'm taking the hit on the resistances to have the increase to damage, but that's okay because the Dark Shrouds are giving me a pretty good amount of protection here, and then of course Harlequin Crest already gives me a 20% damage reduction, so I'm taking that. And then of course, you know, we're using Servex rune words on the Harlequin Crest, so the 5 skills get casted really, really quick. It only has to happen 1 time, and then we get a +1 to all of our skills. And with some of the other skills that we're using based on the max roll build, your life is regenerating fast enough, and you have enough defensive ability with armor and everything else, and barrier generation, that the fact that your resistances suck isn't really that big a deal. As you can see again in the video that I am looping, I'm able to sit here and go through a pit 100 without any issues. It's not a fast pit 100. I'm not crushing it by any means. Again, that's why I say it's not an S tier build. But we, about the halfway point through the pit, start getting ahead of the timer. And I stay ahead of the timer from that point on all the way down to about the 4.5 minute mark remaining. And then I enter into the pit boss, and I'm able to beat the pit boss. So, you know, you'll see that in that video in the corner up there. So you can see the barrier is keeping me alive. The resistances thing is not too much of a problem here. Would love to have these resistances sitting at 70%. It just hasn't worked out that way. As far as our special occult gems go with, we're using the Friend of the Bog, Voice of the Stars, and I forget the other one. It's like, I think Wicked Pact or something. I'm not too stressed about what each one of them are called, but as you can see, my growth and decay witch powers are 35% additive more potent. We're using a lot of growth and decay witch powers. Here, while you have an aura active, your ultimate skills are treated as eldritch, growth and decay and psych skills, and then your ultimate skills deal 10 times multiplicative damage here, 10% multiplicative increased damage. And then here, while we have 3 or more growth and decay powers, which we will, you gain 8% multiplicative primary core stat, and then 10% multiplicative maximum life. So currently my maximum life is sitting at 11,000. So for our witch powers, let's get into it. Right now, another defensive thing, and again, why I'm not too worried about the level of my actual resistances, is I'm using Vengeful Spirit here as my primary witch power. So he's taken all the hits for me. He's taken all the damage initially, and then he, explodes, dies, whatever, and comes back, and then starts absorbing all the damage for me again. So that's what helps to make the build, from a resistance standpoint, very defensively strong. The next thing we're using aura siphoning here for obvious reasons, because you heal for 1% of your life as that aura is being maintained. We're using aura specialization so that we get a much bigger size of our auras, and then we deal 35% increased critical strike damage to enemies who are within the aura. So as long as we stay in the center of our death trap and suck all those enemies in, you're getting that increased critical strike damage, right? We're going with DK augmentation here, which is what's recommended on Maxroll's site. So our witchcraft powers are going to deal an additional 54% of their damage, which is nice now that it's maxed out. And our damage over time effects exceed 85%, then the target just gets executed. Now, I'm not really doing a whole lot of damage over time with this particular layout and this build, so I need to find a way to increase that or switch this witch power out with something else. It is the recommended one. I just don't know if it's working for me since I'm not doing a whole lot of damage over time. And you can see that in the build itself. In the video, you'll see the dark red bar isn't, or I should say the bright red bar isn't going down with a dark red bar behind it. If there was a darker red behind it, you could see that difference in between their health and then damage over time difference there. And I really don't have that going on, so I may kind of play with this particular power here and change it out for something else down here once I get the rest of them maxed out. We're using Purging Touch, of course, because our Eldritch effects will deal 40% increased damage to all enemies, and our Death Trap and Grenades and everything else are all now being considered. I hate when it does that. Sorry about that. So let's get back into it here, and we'll get things back up and running. Blizzard, fix that. Just because I'm not moving or doing anything doesn't mean you should disconnect me from the game. That is so stupid. Keep me in the game. I'm in the game, man. There's no reason to disconnect me just because I'm not moving around or doing something. So, Eldritch effects. 40% increased damage to all enemies. All of our skills basically will get that on there because they're all considered core skills now, and core skills are going to get the Eldritch effect added to them, right? So, and that's all because I think it's the Voice of the Stars or Friend of the Bog gem there that we're using. So you definitely want to take Purging Touch. And then our final witch power here is Soul Harvest. You gain a 1% primary core stat increase multiplicative per surrounding enemy, and that bonus lasts for 20.3 seconds. And then, of course, while there are surrounding enemies, Soul Harvest has infinite duration. So we're using that particular witch power because we're always going to have enemies around us, right? You're kind of constantly moving from enemy to enemy to enemy, either through evade or through shadow step, and maintaining some buffs through those. And so you're always going to have some sort of surrounding enemies around you, and therefore Soul Harvest is just going to always kind of be going and active. So right now, the only witch power I think that I'm going to play with here is probably DK Augmentation. Again, I want to max these guys out, and then eventually I'll start playing with some different witch powers and see if something better happens. So that's pretty much the build layout here. We are going with the specialization of preparation, of course, so that when we spend 75 energy, it reduces our ultimate skills cooldown by 5 seconds. You need your ultimate to be at 10 seconds or less in order for this build to work properly so that you can constantly cast Deathtrap. Currently, my Deathtrap is at 8 seconds. If I switch this to Inner Sight, you'll see this is still at 8 seconds. And I could use the Inner Sight to then get this bonus here of 80% chance to spawn an extra Caltrops, Poison Trap, or Death Trap. But I don't think it works really well, because part of Death Trap's unique ability is that when an enemy dies, it will cool itself down again, right? So Death Trap kills an enemy, its cooldown is reduced by 10 seconds. So the build isn't powerful enough yet to pretty much one-shot kill stuff. Now, it will do that in Tier 4. So if you're running Tier 4 content, you're running with the bosses, like the Uber bosses, Duriel and Dariel, whoever, you can probably switch your specialization over to Core, right? And get that extra trap casting out of it. But when you're running pits, especially higher pits, you don't kill stuff as quickly. You're not one-shotting things, so your cooldown isn't going to be there for your Death Trap to be able to cancel it constantly. So you have to go with preparation if you're going to run pits. If you're running T4 content, which you pretty much one-shot stuff, you could almost just use Death Trap and nothing else, right? Typically, the way this build works is using preparation, you're using Barrage, who is shooting fast enough and casting fast enough that it sucks down all of your energy, so you're spending 75 energy instantaneously, even though it says it's only a 30 cost on the energy. When you shoot this off, it actually shoots and uses all of your energy, so it meets the preparation 75 energy count, and then instantly cools off your Death Trap. So that's very, very important when you're running the higher pits, because you need the Death Trap to pretty much cool off instantly so that you can then cast it again. And you're basically swapping back and forth between Death Trap and Barrage. Now, if you look at my video and what's playing up there, you will see that I actually hold down my 2, 3, and 4 attacks. I'm tapping 4, which is my Death Trap, and I'm holding down Barrage, which is my primary mouse button. And all I'm using is the Shift key, or in my case, it's swapped out with the space bar. I use the space bar as my force attack to hold me still, and then I keep Barrage constantly firing, and then I'm just tapping Death Trap while holding down my Shadow Step and my grenades. And I'm doing that to keep my mobility skill active, because then that comes into play with our skill tree setup here, which is the actual version of it, to where close quarters combat, right? So you damage a close enemy with a marksman or cutthroat skill, gets you 15% attack speed. And then while both attack speed bonuses are active, you deal increased damage up to 25%. So our cutthroat is Shadow Step. So we need Shadow Step to be constantly going. Grenades just gives a nice boost in damage to Deathtrap. Deathtrap, obviously, as you can see, it's doing 1.3 million in damage there. And that's all going to come into play with the Paragon board that we'll get into here in a second. And then Barrage, of course, is just so that we can get the marksman side of it, but also trigger the cooldown for the Deathtrap. So basically it's holding down 2, 3, tapping 4, while also holding down primary mouse and our force attack, and just constantly launching Deathtraps over and over and over again. So all of that pretty much comes into play on this Paragon board right here, which is our cheap shot, right? The nice thing about cheap shot here is we've got the explosive glyph in it, and if you see that right there, right, we're doing 1,368.5% stun grenade damage, and then stun grenade damage is increased by a multiplicative of 30.1%. Since pretty much all of our skills are now stun grenade, with the exception, at least all of our trap skills are now stun grenade, with exception to Shadow Step, right? Caltrops is a stun grenade, so it's doing this massive damage increase. So you periodically, I only use it with bosses or tough enemies. I toss in the Caltrops here and there. But grenades and Deathtrap are both stun grenade now because of the one aspect that we're using. And they're getting a massive, massive damage boost here because of this. This is pretty much the max roll board layout as far as all the board choices and glyph choices, with exception to a couple. So of course the starter board, we're putting in our ambush here so that our trap skills get an increase. The more strength you have in here, the better. I have gotten, I believe, all the strengths that I can get, and there are no more to get, maybe one more here, it looks like, so I might put a point there, and then I pretty much have utilized all of those, so that's going to be maxed out. Here again, we're looking for dexterity. All the dexterities in here have been chosen, it looks like, so I think I'm pretty much done with this board. Maybe here and there pick up a few things like 10% damage increase here, 10% damage increase there, as I get closer and closer to level 300 and get my max points laid out here. Our next board coming over, we're using, of course, the Dance Macabre. So casting mobility or a subterfuge skill, it's going to get you 75% damage increase, multiplicative, right? So Shadow Step is a subterfuge skill, but it's also a mobility skill. And then, of course, you're also going to be using your evade, as you can see on my secondary mouse button. That's where my evade is. So as long as I cast those periodically, and it's roughly, I think, like every 8 seconds, I keep that 75% multiplicative boost. So the idea here is to, if I'm not always using the Shadow Step, it's periodically I will evade out of the battle and then back into the battle real quick, and then keep casting my Deathtrap. So you may periodically see me doing that. And I'm kind of alternating between those two to try to keep that damage boost going. Here we're using our control glyph for obvious reasons. It's a damage increase to crowd controlled enemies. So we are crowd controlling them with our auras and stuff, as well as sucking them in and trapping them in with Deathtrap. It pulls them all in and kind of stuns them for a second, and that stun is a crowd control, so that gives you these damage boosts. So the idea is to keep applying Deathtrap, keep sucking them in, keeping them stunned. We also have chance to stuns on our temperings and things of that nature as a way of applying crowd control. Here on the Deadly Ambush, right, trap skills increase critical strike damage, 23% multiplicative, and we're going with Snare here. So this is where I think one of the differences might be with with max rolls layout. I can't remember if they're using snare or not off the top of my head, but I went with snare here because it's specific to traps. So we get an 18% multiplicative trap damage. Our trap damage is doing 240.2% trap damage, and then non-ultimate skills have a 25% increased radius. So while death trap's overall size remains the same, our grenades radius is bigger and the caltrops radius is bigger. And then they also get considered as stun grenades, so they have a bigger radius, doing a larger area of effect damage-wise based off of the explosive glyph, right? So the damage increase that they're getting is now being spread over a bigger area, so it kind of covers a larger area for that. And then, of course, here we're trying to pick up all the intelligence that we can as we build the board out, because we get a 22.2% increased damage here. So I'm fairly certain I've gotten all the intelligence picked up that I can get. So here we might add to increase critical strike damage. And for that most part, I think this board's going to be filled out. I may come over here and go for damage reduction, or maybe trap cooldown. I think the trap cooldown and the trap damage increase here is going to be best, so I'm probably going to come off of here and come down. Obviously, I have enough intelligence here, so not only would I get a 6% trap cooldown, but I'll get another 3% on top of that, so it's 9%. And then my death trap cooldown is going to be way less than 6% probably at that point. In which case, I may be able to just run around casting death trap and not even need to use barrage at all once we eventually get here. It may get that death trap cooldown to a point to where I can just cast it. If the damage is high enough, it's killing something, it cools itself down instantly. Periodically, maybe I may still have to use barrage to get that extra cooldown here and there as needed, but I think I might be able to just kind of run around shooting off death traps and nothing but death traps, which will make the build a lot faster, especially in T4 content, because that's all you'll need to use is death trap. In T4 level, you'll just kill everything with a one shot. So you just run around, death trap something, it dies, death trap instantly cools off, run to the next group, death trap, run to the next group, death trap, and you can just kind of move from group to group because you're going to be one shot and everything on a T4 level at that point. So I think we're gonna shoot for this as our next primary build out right here. On our final board, and this is where I made one of the major changes. This is the no witnesses board, so ultimate skills get a 20% multiplicative damage increase. I'm at the current bonus is 60% max, so I can't really go any higher with it. Here, we don't really need to add anything more to this board because we're using the devious glyph. This gives us a 2% multiplicative, up to 10% multiplicative increased damage for 20 seconds to enemies or bosses with an attack that applies a crowd control effect. So if we have a high enough chance to stun, when we attack with death trap stunning them, we're going to get that multiplicative damage increase, right? So you want to make sure that all of your temperings on your armor and stuff are an increase to stun effect on anything that you can do that with, which is mostly going to be your gloves and then I think your crossbow, because everything else is a unique item. So, it's going to be rough to try to get that to kick, but there's enough other things giving chance to stun, chance to everything else that that you're applying crowd control effects, your auras, right? So this pretty much keeps it kicking. The max roll calls for versatility. I don't use versatility, and I'm going to explain why here. The additional bonus of versatility, non-basic and non-core skills deal 25 times increased damage. So you would think, oh yeah, use versatility because you're using death trap, which is an ultimate skill, and you're going to get a 25% multiplicative increased damage. I didn't see that happening. I had versatility on there, but the damage didn't seem to be increasing like it should. And I think that's because we're wearing the aspect that turns our ultimate into a core skill. It gets the core tag. And so because it gets the core skills tag, I don't think it's benefiting from versatility. And that kind of sucks. I mean, it should get the core tag as an addition to, but it still should be considered a non-core skill at the same time and give you that damage boost increase. And I just didn't see it happening. I was actually doing more damage wearing Devious than I am doing wearing Versatility. So I took Versatility off. I don't think it's doing what it's supposed to do. I don't know if that's a bug, if it's a glitch, or if it's intentional. I just know that with Versatility, I didn't feel like I was getting the damage that I should have been getting, and swapped it out with Devious to get the damage to go up a bit. Now, I could look at other things like Canny. Deathtrap being what it is a non-physical damage attack. So therefore, you should get the 1% multiplicative up to 15%, which in this case, overall that's higher than Devious because Devious tops out at 10%. So I may switch Canny once I get it to level 100, but it requires intelligence, and so I'm going to have to rework this board because this board uses dexterity, and I just don't know if there's going to be enough intelligence pickup here. I mean, there should be enough intelligence pickup here to get what we need, but I'm really going to have to redesign the board layout to get that. And in that case, I'm going to have to make some sacrifices, or if I go with Canny, I'm going to have to do this layout before I do the traps over here, and I just don't know if it's going to be more beneficial. So for now, I'm just going to go with Devious because it uses dexterity, and Versatility also uses dexterity, and it was an easy swap, right? I'm not using Turf, which is another recommendation of theirs. I swapped that one out with, I believe it was the Control one or whatever, or Snare, because I feel like Snare is doing a much better job than Turf is. I don't need the damage reduction. I'm not having a problem, as you can see in the video, running a level 100. Not really having a problem with defensive side of things anymore at this point, so I don't need the damage reduction. Fluidity, you could use that because, when you cast an agility skill, you're dealing 10 times increased damage and gain 15 times increased energy regeneration. So you could put fluidity in on that last board as well because it's also dexterity based. And I may try that once I get it up to where it needs to be because we are casting an agility skill all the time. As you can see down here, our agility skill is Shadow Step, right? That's an agility, so if we're using it, we're going to get that 10 times multiplier. Dash is also an agility, so we're going to get that 10 times multiplier. So I'm working on building that particular glyph up so that I can then maybe make use of fluidity and get the damage crease in there because again, it starts out at 10% multiplicative. That's not a build up to it like with Devious. It's just right off the bat 10 times increased damage immediately. And then of course we get the increased energy regeneration, which is nice. It would be really, really nice if on this last board there was something that would increase our overall energy amount. Unfortunately, the Rogue doesn't have anything like that, like on the Sorcerer where you have Hubris or something with the one Paragon board. Because I would really, really, really love to get his energy levels to, say, 275 and then swap out the amulet here and go with an overpower based build. Now, of course, if I do that, I'm going to have to take the Tricksters and move it to the ring, but then Vehement Brawlers is going to have to go somewhere else. I believe Vehement Brawlers can go on weapons, so I may be able to then swap out Blast Trappers with Vehement Brawlers, put the Overpower Amulet on, and then move the tricksters to the ring. Now, I might still be able to do that. Here's the idea, and the reason why I say that. I know that the way the Banished Lord's Talisman works, so let's go pull it up and just look at it, because I do have a perfect roll one here, level 800, 60%. Multiplicative. But the way it works, after you spend 100 or 275 of your primary resource, your next core skill is guaranteed to overpower, and your critical strikes at overpower deals 60 times increased damage. Right? 60% multiplicative. So, okay, Grenburl, how are you going to run that right now, even if you make the aspect changes that you're talking about making? Well, I wouldn't be overpowering every single time, but I need to spend 275 energy, right? So obviously, let's call it 180 on my energy right now just to make the numbers easy. 180 and 180, right? Add those together. That's 360. So that's way over what I need. So 2 casts of Deathtrap and Barrage combo there, right? And then my Deathtrap. So if I do a Barrage to eat all my energy up, cast Deathtrap to get my energy back, then cast Barrage to eat my energy up again, right? Now I've hit that 360 mark. Then that next Deathtrap should overpower. And so it should happen often enough that basically every fourth attack is basically a guaranteed overpower strike, and anything within the Deathtrap area should die. It's something I need to play and experiment with, but I think in the end it'll be a pretty powerful attack. So, and it might be worth it, right? It's only every 4th shot that's overpowering and killing everything, but it's a guaranteed overpower. It's a guaranteed critical strike damage. If our critical strike damage is high enough, in which case my critical strike damage is pushing about 557 here, so maybe tweak some things out, maybe change out damage to close enemies, and exchange it for increased critical strike damage so that we can get that strike damage as high as possible. It might be an interesting style of a build to do an overpower build, but just you're not overpowering every shot. It's going to be about every 4th shot. But you're attacking fast enough that 4th shot is going to happen fairly quick, right? Your 4th, your 8th, your 12th, right? Those are all going to kind of happen really fast. So it might be something worth trying, and if I do try it and I get it worked out and everything works out well, I'll do an update video on that. But again, in order to do that, I still need to figure out how to get tricksters to the ring. That shouldn't be a problem, but I need to make sure that Vehement Brawler can be placed on another item. And you know what? Let's just go check. If Vehement Brawlers can be placed on a weapon, then this could potentially work out. So let's go up here and we'll search Vehement, and Vehement Brawler can. There we go. So I could put Vehement Brawler in place of Blast Trapper, still keep my 11% here, and then I'm pretty sure Tricksters can go on a ring. So Tricksters can go on a ring, and so then we can swap that out. Because again, the only thing we care about Tricksters, we're not really cared about the stun grenades dealing 43% increased damage, because it's not an additive, it's not a multiplicative, it's just a straight 43%. We only care about Tricksters because it makes Caltrop, Smoke Grenade, and Death Traps all stun grenades. And then stun grenades will deal whatever number you have there if you get it to the max level, which mine requires 2 more to get to, right? Then that comes into play against the explosives glyph, which is going to get that 1000% increase at that point. and then the multiplicative to the 1000% and just give you mass damage. So the idea here is to, yes, maybe have an overpower build that's I don't know, a semi 50% overpower, so it may be enough that you suck all the enemies in, you're stunning them, you're doing that little bit of damage, then you get your fourth attack in, it overpowers, kills everything, right? You move on to the next group, attack, 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 overpower, kill everything. And it may do it a little bit faster. So I'm going to play a little bit of experimentation and some play, and then we'll see what happens. So, all right, so that is, as it stands, my current version of my version of the Grenades of Deathtrap build. Again, it's based off the max roll build, but with some tweaks that I think were more beneficial to how I play and seem to be working out better for me. I do want to try an Era of Perdition version once I get an extra Era of Perdition. And then I'm also thinking if I could get a Shroud of False Death, I might wear that in place of Scoundrel's Letters in order to get the +1 to all passives. But then I'm going to lose the trap and grenade skills being core skills, which I think is going to cause me to lose that 20% multiplicative core skill damage increase. So I don't know. I may not do that. The build on max roll doesn't show them wearing anything other than Air of Perdition. And so I may just give that a shot and see how well it does. I know Woody Joe is another person I follow, and he is working on a similar build, but he's actually wearing the Scoundrel's Leathers, and he seems to be doing pretty good with that version. But for me, personally, I'm thinking this layout is working best for me right now. So I'm going to go with the Harlequin Crest just to keep it. I'll try the Perdition, but I don't know. I need the damage reduction that this gives me. And that, +4 ranks to all skills is kind of nice. So I'll take it. So but that's the build. Give it a shot. Give it a try. Let me know what you think. And do some playing around, experimenting on your own. And, comment down below if there's any changes that you've made that you feel make the build better. I'm always interested in improving the build. This is the second build that I have done for Season 7. My first build was, of course, the Bloodwave Necromancer. And I have videos posted. I think one of them was crushing a 115 pit, and then I eventually went up to a 130. So, but at that point, I was like, I've done everything in the season with the Necro that needs to be done. So I want to do another build. I want to try something different. And came across this Deathtrap build, so I gave it a shot, and I'm really, really enjoying it so far. But I'm also almost done with this Deathtrap build as well. I think I have 2 more levels to achieve on the Witches reps, and then that's it. There's nothing more to gain there. And so at that point, I may start a third Season 7 character, but I may try the third season character only to pull off a little trick here, which I'm going to tell you about in this video. But before I do that, I am going to have to get rid of the looping video, so let me remove that. And so here's what I'm thinking. I've got all these chests here that I can open up, right? It'd be interesting to see. I've seen people do this. I have a friend who said he was doing it on his primary character. He's got a druid going, and he's earned a bunch of these little caches, these little chests, and he saved a bunch of them up. And he started a Necro, but he didn't want to waste any time playing through the game to level the Necro up. So he skipped the campaign mode. Had all of these sitting in his chest here, these extra caches, and then he put them into his local stash and then opened them all up. Now, with each one of these, you get experience points. So he was able to level from 0 to 60 in an instant. So I may just do that. I don't know what other build I'm going to do yet. I don't know if I'm going to go with a barbarian build or if I might try a druid cataclysm. I really don't like builds that use snapshotting. Not that they're bad builds in any way. I just don't like having to sit here and hit this key, then hit that key, wait for this to happen, then use this key to trigger this. That's too much BS. It's too much complications. I just want to be able to get in and either mash the buttons or hit the buttons in a very specific combo, but repeatedly, right? So like, always go 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 5, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, or 6, or 1, 2, 4, and 5, and skip 3 kind of thing or whatever. But I don't want to have to wait, do this, do that to get a certain build up, then finally trigger your primary attack. I like to set the keys up so that I can just constantly attack with them, and it, in a smooth way, builds my damage up and triggers everything. Just like what I do with this rogue, right? I hold down 2, 3, and my primary attack while holding down my space bar to stand still, and then I tap number 4 repetitively, and all my damage buffs and boosts kick in immediately. That's how I like to play. Just nice, quick, simple, easy, casual playstyle. So I may go with a sorcerer. I've kind of been reading up on some of those new items they released that give you your ball lightning, then your super ball lightning. So I might try that. I may go with a barbarian. I don't know. I just think it would be interesting to watch a character go from level 0 to level 60 instantaneously because you opened up a bunch of caches that give you a bunch of experience. I think it's going to be fun, and I may even build a video around that as I do it once I decide which character I'm going to go with next for my 3rd character of Season 7, because I have plenty of time. I've got until the end of April almost, right? So, yeah, we got plenty of time. We got the rest of February and all of March to go, so we'll see how it happens. But until the next video, give the rogue a try and let me know what you think. Peace.